When you're done fertilizing with your organic fertilizer, be sure to apologize to your neighbors. Hi everyone, and welcome to my fertilizer stash down here. So today I want to walk you through basically how I fertilize shrubs in my garden. So I'm a little behind. Has been life this year. We've had lots of rain. We're supposed to get more rain this week, and so I want to get this kind of down to let the rain kind of wash some of that in over the coming week. But this is kind of where I keep a lot of my fertilizers, and so I don't really discriminate on fertilizers. I use some things specifically because I can get them for cheap or cheaper, and so I use Hollytone primarily to fertilize everything. Hollytone is a more acidic fertilizer, but I do have a higher pH soil, and so I typically use this on just about anything and everything from my 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 to my hydrangeas. You can also use rose tone on your hydrangeas, and so I do have some of that as well, which I'll be putting on my roses that I just happened to buy to try out a year or so ago. The tones are kind of expensive, and so I picked this one up. It was $25, looks like it was $19. Fertilizer prices over the past year have increased substantially as well. But my biggest tip for you, and I may regret saying this for those of you who are local, but Home Depot in our location in November puts all of their organic fertilizers on sale. And so I'm constantly going to Home Depot like every day during that time period, and I bought all these bags of plant tone, which I've used in my vegetable garden this year, this bone meal and stuff like that. You can get these, like this would have been $10 regularly during the season. I probably paid $1 for it. I probably paid 50 cents for this bone meal. We have some bulb fuel here, which I'll be using later in the season when I plant bulbs this year. Berry tone, so even these stakes, which I really love by Job's to put around my 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, were also on sale. So I just pick up anything and everything, and I typically buy everything that's there. So if you live locally and it's not there in November, you'll probably know I took it. But this is blood meal, so just anything and everything. I have more stored in my basement that they have that's organic. I purchase in the fall because it stores really excellently, and there's not really an expiration date. I mean, I wouldn't store it for many, many years just because it needs to stay adequately dry and the temperature needs to be good enough so it doesn't it's not going to necessarily spoil, but you get the point. Buy enough that you can use over the next couple years if it's available, and get it cheap. So that's what I do with my fertilizer stash here. So today I'm going to be using a couple things. I'm going to be putting Hollytone all around my hydrangeas and shrubs. Rose tone will be on the roses. I don't have a ton of that left. There looks like there's a little less than half a bag, so I'll use what I have left over. And the only really non-organic fertilizer that I use in my flower beds, we're not talking about containers here. I mentioned on a previous video that I would be going over this when I went over my fertilizing process, and it's this Maxi Bloom formula. It's not necessarily organic, it's a 3-20-20, but it's made from seaweed, or it has a lot of seaweed ingredients, and it's really renowned, from my understanding, in the UK. If anyone's in the UK, you can comment, but rose growers in the UK really love it, and it's really hard to find around here, and it's not cheap. But I got this huge bucket of it a couple years ago at this point, and it will last you a really long time because you only need to use a tiny, tiny scoop for a gallon. So this is what it looks like right here, and it comes, or I use this from a different container, but you just use one of these tiny scoops for a gallon of water, and so it lasts a really, really long time. And this is the analysis on the back. So they have two different versions. This is the Bloom version. So the Bloom version has a little different NPK values to promote that blooming. So I haven't used the Maxi very consistently over the past couple years. I will get into a process and do it for a couple weeks at a time, and then I get busy and forget about it. So I'm going to set a reminder on my phone because that's the best way for me to keep track of these things, to kind of do it weekly or bi-weekly on my roses, and I just spot water them directly. Everything else, I will walk you through my process, but I essentially take a plastic solo cup and I just do like a cup or so per hydrangea. That may be a little over the recommendation, but I've had no issues with it. It's organic. The great thing about organic fertilizers is you're feeding the soil, which in turn feeds the plants. And so I have heavy clay soil. Clay is not necessarily bad. I preach about how many issues I've had with clay on my property a lot, but just know clay is like full of great nutrients. It has a great aspect of holding water if you need it to hold water, but you have to know really how to grow in it, because when clay gets too dry, it is almost impermeable to water. And so there's just those little quirks you've got to figure out to grow successfully in clay. Sometimes it needs to be amended to be able to grow well in it. Sometimes it's not bad enough that you can grow successfully in it. But we're just going to take you through the process, and I'm going to grab some fertilizer right quick. So we're going to start with the roses, and I'm just going to use rose tone on these. Honestly, if I run out of rose tone before I finish fertilizing all my roses, I will switch to the holly tone, simply because I get it from Costco, as I mentioned. It's like $18 for an 18-pound bag, which is one of the cheapest you can find. And I have higher pH soil anyway, and so bringing the soil pH down a little bit isn't going to harm any of the plants in my garden because it's so high. So I would recommend you follow the instructions on the bag. Like I said, I just kind of use a solo cup. I couldn't find one in the garage, so I just grabbed a planter. There are little holes in here, so it will fall out if you're not careful. The directions say to sprinkle 1 1/4 cup around the drip line of the plant. Like I said, I will probably fill this half full per plant. So this is probably pretty close to equivalent of a 16-ounce solo cup. Half a cup is going to be 8 ounces, or half the container is going to be around 8 ounces. So maybe 3/4 full of this, and that should be close to what is recommended. I only fertilize in the spring. Some people will fertilize in the spring and the fall. I just find that's one, it's too expensive for a garden my size, and two, it's a little more labor than is really necessary that I've found. So a lot of these things are going to bloom, and then they'll be fine the rest of the summer. You don't typically want to fertilize in the very hottest part of the year, so July and August, because by applying fertilizer, you're pushing growth on the plant, whether that's blooms or leafy growth through nitrogen, and those can be easily damaged by the heat. And so what I'm going to do is just take a good helping of this rose tone here. So it's about 3/4 full. You can kind of see here. And then we're just going to spread this around the rose. I'm also not really super specific about where I apply it. I just kind of shake it around the root zone of the plant, and that is good enough for me. Now you can scratch this fertilizer in. I will not be doing that because we are going to get rain for several days this week, and it'll kind of naturally settle it into the soil. Now if you have pets, this is organic fertilizer. They might be very interested in it. So we're going to do the rest of the roses, and then we'll come right back and move on to some other shrubs. But first, I want to show you a few of these roses that are blooming right now. So this one is 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, which I mentioned in a video recently, and check out that bloom right there. It's really incredible. So this one was planted last fall. I had it in a container all year on the porch, and I didn't get great blooms off of it because it was a little too dry in the container to produce good blooms for me. So I planted it out in the fall, and it acts like it's been planted here for a while. And so we're just going to spread some little fertilizer around the drip line of it, which the drip line is essentially take the canopy of the plant under the canopy. That's all the drip line means when you're looking at these fertilizer instructions. If you're really lazy, which I have done on a couple occasions, you can just broadcast this fertilizer across your beds, and that works as well. So I know I just walked all of you around the garden, but the garden is changing by the day this time of the year. And so I'm just going to take you around and show you some of the roses that are blooming right now. So this is Olivia Rose Austin, also a really, really beautiful rose. This is one that David Austin didn't send me a couple years ago. I got a mistake shipment that ended up not being Olivia, and so I ordered it again the next year. So glad I did. Perfectly pale, beautiful rose. We have 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, which is just starting to bloom. This bloom's a day or so old and went through some rain. This one's a little newer, I think, but look how beautiful that is. And it's just loaded with buds. The 𝗟𝗟𝗲s are still looking really incredible. They're starting to lose some of their blooms though, with all the rain we've got. So they're not a long blooming shrub, but they're beautiful. And then we have one more up here called Desdemona that's really starting to shine over the past couple days, and it looks better than ever right now. But it has these really beautiful, they're very, very soft pink roses, but they have a really beautiful smell to them. So it's also doing really, really well. So I did end up running out of rose tone. I got most of the roses fertilized. The only ones I have left, I think, is the Lady of Shallot. I don't know how you pronounce that. And it's got one open bloom right now, but I'm just going to fertilize it with my Hollytone as I do everything else in the garden. Now, I don't fertilize my perennials because I don't find that they need it. This is a fresh bag and kind of heavy, but a lot of the boxwoods, the hydrangeas, of course, always get fertilizer. And then any other shrubs that I have this year that are kind of large, I will probably fertilize. But we're going to start with the hydrangeas because there's over 100 in my garden, and that's going to take a little bit of time. So Hollytone has slightly different instructions because it's more generic for a wider variety of plants. I guess you could say rose tone obviously is targeted towards roses or other woody shrubs. And like I said, you could put rose tone on these hydrangeas, but I apply Hollytone to bring down my soil pH a little bit, as I mentioned, particularly around those mountain hydrangeas, the serratas, or the macrophyllus that change color. And so I want to get that blue color. I'll also be applying some soil acidifier to them probably before long. I might apply that tomorrow or this week, so it will also work itself into the soil in this rain. But Hollytone says to apply 1 cup per foot diameter of drip line. And so I am going to be, it says double it if it's larger than 3 feet. And so these hydrangeas are right now wider than 3 feet. They've been here since 2019 is when I planted them, April 2019. I think I just answered that question in a video the other day. I keep thinking it was 2018, but you know, we lost kind of 2 years of our lives there, and so I've got my numbers all messed up. But this is their 4th growing season, so these are 3-year-old, fully 3-year-old in the ground, incredible hydrangeas. Just now starting to set bloom. And so I'm going to fill this absolutely to the max, and I might want to wear a mask when you're putting fertilizer in a cup, because one just almost bounced in my mouth. But anyway, I'm going to fill this completely up to fertilize these hydrangeas, and I may end up putting 1.5 cups because these are really large. So let's just try this out. Once again, I'm just going to go around the drip line, but with these hydrangeas, I'm usually pretty more generous with these because these are some of the biggest shrubs in my garden. And so I am actually going to put 2 full scoops in here. You can do that with organic fertilizer. If you're using a synthetic, just be more careful with that approach because you could burn the plant. And then while I'm over here, I'm also going to fertilize these emerald green 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, and I'm just going to give them 1 cup. Or 1 scoop, which is kind of like 1.5 to 2 cups. Because they were planted at the same time the hydrangeas were. And so they're getting pretty large here on their 4th growing season as well. If you have a long line or a hedge, obviously you're not going to add that whole cup per shrub. And so what I do is I just come along and generously sprinkle around the plants as I go along. Nothing significant. It's not necessary to give them all of that fertilizer, but you get an idea of you're giving them just a little bit. These are also new, so I don't want to encourage that much growth anyway until the root system is better developed on these tiny shrubs. And so we just go around and sprinkle a little bit on the side of the shrubs and through and among them, and that's good enough. And that is pretty much it. So is fertilizing your garden necessary? Probably not. Is it helpful for some plants? Absolutely. If you mulch your garden regularly with either good compost or good bark, does that break down and provide nutrition to your plants? Yes. If you live in a climate where you have storms, thunderstorms, does that provide good nitrogen for the plants, more soluble nitrogen? Yes. So there's all sorts of components that go into growing a great garden. Fertilizing is just one of them. I'm not going to recommend that you do it. I think it's great if you have the ability to do it. Fertilizer prices have gotten really expensive, so your garden is not necessarily going to suffer. The one caveat to that is if you are not in a good habit of providing supplements to your soil, like mulch that breaks down over time, feeds the earth, which in turn feeds your plants, you may want to apply something to your garden just to give them a little boost. Otherwise, the more fertilizer you provide, the better they're going to grow, and so stuff may grow and more and have to be pruned more. That's just kind of the part of being a gardener. I myself tend to fertilize the big things, all of my hydrangeas and roses, because those are my prides and joys. I do fertilize my big trees or evergreens with holly tone typically. There's also a tree tone that you can apply, or you can apply those stakes I showed you at the beginning of this video that you hammer into the ground. I have found those to be really successful, and I've had great success growing my green giants with those stakes that were exclusively fertilized with those stakes for a number of years. But that's pretty much it. So don't fret over it too much. If you have the capacity to spend some money in the fall getting those fertilizers on discount like I mentioned, grab them. They'll be fine in the spring, the next year, or years to come if you purchase enough of it like I do. And if you don't have the money to fertilize your garden, I would put that money towards mulch to the extent you have it, good mulch that will break down over time, or in the alternative, compost that will also provide good nutrition for your garden. You can also choose to fertilize with synthetic fertilizers, which you'll get a little more bang for your buck. Make sure you read those instructions carefully, because synthetic fertilizers are a quick fertilization and you can risk burning your plants that way. When you're done fertilizing with your organic fertilizer, be sure to apologize to your neighbors, because it will be kind of stinky for a while. Not too long. It's not that bad. The rain will wash it down and in, and the smell will disappear in a few days. But Rob and Diane, if you're watching, I apologize. It may be a little stinky around here for the next couple days. And watch for your dogs. The organic shouldn't harm them as much, but it may make them sick if they eat too much of it. So mine are very attracted to the smell of it and will dig and kind of rifle through the mulch to get at it. So we'll just have to watch them until it rains and all that's kind of washed into the soil. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful to let you know how I take care of my garden in the spring. And thank you guys for joining. One quick update before I leave. I do want to show you the soil plugs that I started the other day. So this is what they look like now. I have 2 trays. One of them was left out in a thunderstorm that we didn't typically get this time of year, and it looks like mush. So this is what it looks like, but there's still zinnias growing in it. They don't look the best, and so I'll have to pluck those out when it gets time to plant them in the ground. And I could probably plant them in the ground right now. I'm going to give them a little longer to grow on. But this is what you typically get when you create soil blocks. And see, you can hold it a little better right now, but you can see maybe these roots here at the bottom. This kind of being air pruned, and so it's getting a nice root system for me to stick directly in the ground. The sunflowers are probably ready to go. and I may plant those out this coming week before it starts raining or while it's raining, so those can settle in before it starts getting too hot around here. Thank you guys for joining me, and remember, in a world full of hate, be a light. Take care.